Keir Starmer talked about an island of strangers. Do you think that there needs to be more done?
He said we didn't want to become an island of strangers. And of course, community cohesion and integration is important, and the government are taking steps to look at English requirements. But we absolutely can't lose sight of the contribution for decades that we have seen from immigration. I'm a Derby MP and really proud of that contribution, which isn't just in the NHS but also in our industries. And so,
but I don't think anyone's necessarily arguing with that, are they? They're talking about how much you adopt,
and it's about how you
the culture of the country.
And I think that language is a huge part of that, to enable people to fully be able to appreciate and be a part of our communities, and I think that's right. But I certainly wouldn't want to see kind of pulling down, tearing down or emptying properties when we've had so little building of especially social housing and affordable housing for so long. And I'd much rather welcome, as I do, the 39 billion that we'll see to build more affordable and social housing.
Alex, what do you make of what you saw in that documentary? And do you think it applies in any way to what's happening in this country?
Of course it applies to this country. We already have balkanised communities, and that spells out a great peril for the future of societal integration. And you've got similar policies being adopted in Sweden. These are sort of proposals that are now being looked into across Europe because we've realised what's happened with levels of immigration and lack of integration. It's creating social disquiet and disharmony to the point in which people are even starting to use words such as civil war, for crying out loud. Now, I think there is nothing wrong with defending your national cultural mores, your communal morality, and I think that that's what we need to be doing. I fully agree we need to ban the full face covering, which they've done in Denmark. I think that is absolutely right. I think that is a barrier for integration if you're not making eye contact. English language is vitally important. I think we need to look at the amount of translation services we offer. I personally would go as far as getting rid of faith schools that are not Catholic or C of E, which tend to allow children from other faiths to come in, because I don't think taking children away and educating them primarily in their own cultural context is healthy. And I personally would also go as far as banning the slaughter of animals that haven't been pre-stunned. And I'd say to anybody who says, well, we don't like that and we demand exceptions because of what we want within our system, this is our country. We believe in animal welfare. We don't believe that women should be shamed for exposing their faces. And we believe little children should all play in a sandpit together. Simple.
Liz?
I'm going to have to react to the piece that we just saw from Simon Reeves, because we're talking about forced evictions there. And that's the comparison that we are discussing today. This is really bad stuff for us to be talking about in Europe. We've been here before. And when I came in, what I wanted to talk about actually was the fact that in Denmark, they are prepared, they're quite resigned to paying 46% of their income on taxation. We only spend 34% here, so that in Denmark, of course, there is much more money within the public services to try and integrate into communities. But what we're hearing, and we're hearing it today from Alex, is this rhetoric of division. Of course, we must find a way to bring our communities together.
So how do you do that?
About a civil war.
No, I say other people have started saying that, and that's alarming. Rhetoric of division. I'm talking about making sure people are brought together and not divided.
You came on television and you used that term.
No, it's very clear.
She said other people had been saying it.
Reached the point that other people are warning of that.
There
is
is a tactic of raising things and then couching it in that sort of term. But this language that we're using...
Do you think that there aren't divisions? Do you think that anything does need to be done, or you don't think that...
I think when we were talking about schools just now, you could equally apply that, and it'll be interesting next year with reforms policies about Welsh medium schools in Wales, quite frankly. Of course we have to have common values, of course we have to have...
And how far should the state make sure that happens? In terms of speaking the same language?
Has a role in making communities safer. We don't have youth clubs anymore, we've lost libraries. 14 years of austerity, which this government are continuing, that has a direct effect on how our communities hang together. This high rhetoric just drives further divisions. If we really want to make a difference to our communities, we have to do the boring stuff, the expensive stuff. If we value community cohesion, which I think they actually do in many of the countries of Scandinavia. We don't get that on the cheap with a load of American-style divisive rhetoric.
Is this the danger, Neil, in Kemi Badesnight looking at this? I mean, some of what's happening in Denmark has been criticised by human rights groups.
Look, Kemi hasn't said she's going to adopt the Denmark proposals wholesale. What she said is she's going to look at this issue. I think that's an eminently sensible thing to do. You're the leader of the opposition. You are formulating your policy platform. We know that this is a significant issue that comes up on the doorsteps up and down the country. There are tensions within our communities. I think if we pretend that there aren't, that would be disingenuous. And so it is quite right we look at what options are available in order to make sure that we have more societal cohesion. That is a sensible approach, and it's a grown-up approach.
You've just seen it. And let's be honest, this was not simply a debate. It was a direct confrontation over what Britain's identity really is. On one side was Labour MP Catherine Atkinson. On the other was Talk TV's Phillips. Two women, two sharply different views of what it means to be British in 2025. Atkinson opened with familiar Labour arguments. She said immigration helped build Britain. She argued that immigrants keep the NHS running. And she insisted the solution is more funding for housing, libraries and youth clubs. It was the standard political message. Spend more money and trust that the problems will ease over time. But here's the reality. People are not upset because there aren't enough libraries. They're frustrated because the country no longer feels the way it once did. And that is where Phillips entered the discussion. She directly challenged the comfortable story many politicians rely on. Phillips said Britain is not coming together, it is drifting apart. She described communities becoming divided, with groups living very different lives and following very different rules. She spoke plainly and did not soften her words. Phillips argued for banning full face coverings, ending taxpayer-funded translation services, and closing faith schools that separate children based on belief. Whether people agree with her or not, she voiced opinions that many across the country hold privately, but feel too afraid to say out loud. Then came the moment that made everyone pause. Britain needs to be Britain. Short words, but a hard message. Because what is the point of welcoming the world if Britain slowly loses its own identity? What happens when multiculturalism stops bringing people together and instead starts pulling society apart? The commentator summed it up clearly at the end. Britain does not need to copy Denmark's high-tax nanny state approach to integration. This country once had something stronger. It had pride, shared values, and a clear sense of right and wrong, shaped by Christian traditions and personal freedom. That is what kept Britain united for generations. But when people arrive not to become part of Britain, but to reshape it, rising tension should not come as a surprise. So let's be honest about what this debate really revealed. It exposed the true divide running through the country. Atkinson speaks for a political class still holding on to idealistic thinking. Phillips speaks for a growing number of ordinary Britons who feel powerless as their towns, schools and traditions change without their consent. That is the difficult reality the establishment prefers to avoid. Multiculturalism without integration is not a strength. It is a slow-building crisis. So the real question tonight is not who won the debate. The real question is this. Is Britain willing to stand up for what it truly is before that identity fades away? Now it's over to you. Was Phillips right to say these things openly? Or is Catherine Atkinson's gentler approach still the right path forward? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, because this conversation is far from finished.